today's a really special show in that we are remembering the one-year memorial of the start of the Israeli war, which happened October 7th, 2023. And so now we know that what happened. And this year is really a time to remember, but also to really call for prayer and unity as Christians for Israel. And so we're going to be able to do that today.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to believe the lie that we're helpless, that we are victims, but we all know the God of the universe who is in control of all things. And so we're encouraging you to be part of the solution. And again, it's easy to see the problems, to see the storms, but we know the one who calms the storms.
Right.
Well, now this is an update video from IFCJ Canada, a ministry on the front lines of Israel, who's had a presence since the war began to show us how they continue to serve the needs of those affected with humanitarian aid and giving hope for a better future. Watch this.
This
is a war zone. Right there's Lebanon. The rockets come from right there, directly to here.
Sirens on Israel's northern border, Kiryat Shmona.
This is a war zone where there are elderly who are helpless, who are alone, and who are relying on the fellowship for food. I am on the border with Lebanon, where less than a mile that way are Hezbollah terrorists who have been launching rockets every single day into this Israeli town. Right behind me, you have the Fellowship Soup Kitchen. They had a direct hit. You can see the roof that was destroyed. This is a piece of the rocket. It's terrifying seeing the destruction, and it's terrifying standing here because it's dangerous.
Since the beginning of the war, we are preparing here around 1,000 meals a day. I was here. First I had a loud explosion from far away. I continued working here, and then there was another explosion. One of the missiles hit here, and the other one in our neighbor's house here. I went out, and everything was covered in dust. I couldn't see anything. I heard screaming, "Help! Help!"
The Fellowship Soup Kitchen is right across the street from where this 85-year-old man lives. Throughout the war, he's been getting food every single day from the soup kitchen. Oh, wow. And when the rocket hit his home, came into his kitchen, it was the volunteers from the Fellowship Soup Kitchen who were the first ones here. Our volunteers who are here risking their lives to feed the elderly people of Israel who can't evacuate. I'm going house to house delivering these meals, but the desperation in this war zone is something that I've never experienced before. When Yenta heard that the soup kitchen was hit by a rocket, her hands started shaking. She physically started shaking, because this is what she relies on to eat. She doesn't have food in this evacuated city that's under constant rocket attack without these meals that the Fellowship brings to her. No one else is coming to these cities on the border that are under attack. It's the Fellowship, our soup kitchen, our volunteers. That is how Yenta gets food, and if we stopped, she would no longer have food.
Well, joining us now after seeing that powerful video is Yael Eckstein, president of IFCJ Canada. And so thank you so much for not only what you are doing, but for being here today to tell us a little bit about what we could do to be a part of the solution. And so what is the current situation for the people in Israel, and how has it really affected their daily lives?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, to everyone at the 700 Club that for the past year has stood with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews Canada in prayer and in action to really help us save lives on the front lines. You have such a big part of this biblical, prophetic, life-saving work that we have been doing for the past year. The situation in Israel is very difficult. We have been getting rocket attacks almost daily since October 7th. It's changed from Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip launching rockets at southern Israel to Hezbollah terrorists on Israel's northern border, launching rockets into cities like Haifa and Nazareth, and to Tel Aviv, and to Judea and Samaria. We know that we are surrounded by this axis of evil, all of the 7 fronts that Iran has put on Israel's borders in order to, as they say, destroy Israel and wipe it into the sea. And so although it's been such a challenging year that we really feel like we are in a war for our survival, and we've buried too many people, too many children, too many young soldiers, there are too many widows and orphans here in Israel. We also realize we are in the front lines of good versus evil, of sanctifying life against these terrorists who just seek death. And if we could make the world a little bit safer by eradicating these terror groups so they don't target Canada and America and Europe, then we're willing to pay that price.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so courageous in not just knowing about it, but doing something about it. And so, how are you responding? I mean, there are probably so many needs that we could talk about. Obviously, there's the physical needs, but again, in that video, we're reminded of the emotional, the trauma, the needs, the loss, the grief. And so, what role are you playing as an organization to those communities affected by this conflict?
Well, we really look at our role as you open up the Bible and it says very clearly what our role is: to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the poor, to be the watchmen on the walls as these rockets are falling. And so, unfortunately, we can't stop the rockets from falling, but we could provide aid for people who are in their bomb shelters. So we are going bomb shelter to bomb shelter, providing meals. We've provided over 500,000 meals to people of Israel in their bomb shelters. And to those first responders who are putting themselves at risk by going out and responding to the rocket attacks and defending the Israeli cities, Jewish and Christian, like Nazareth and Tiberias and Jerusalem. Cities are important to both Jews and Christians alike and have both of our history. The fellowship is there to protect them. For many months, we learned that they were going out during missile attacks without bulletproof vests or helmets. And so we came and said, no, we want to protect you. We want you to be protected as you go out to protect others. So wherever there's a call to save lives, to provide shelter, to bring food, the fellowship is there and telling the people on the ground, Christians in Canada and around the world, stand with you, love you, and will never abandon you, no matter what it says on the news.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, we know it is a physical conflict, but there's also emotional conflict. And we know it as people of faith, it's a spiritual conflict. And so, why do you think it's so essential that Christians and Jews join forces during this really critical time in our world history?
Well, I have to tell you, it's been 1 year since October 7th, since the world changed, since we were forced to look at evil in the eye and say, evil exists, and they are threatening us both, Christians and Jews. They themselves say, first they go for the Saturday people, that's the Jewish people, and then they go for the Sunday people, the Christians. At first they go for the little Satan, that's Israel, then they go for the big Satan, that's America and Canada. And so we're in this together. Unfortunately, throughout history, as anti-Semitism reared its ugly head, you always had the heroes like the Corrie ten Booms, but they were extraordinary. They weren't the norm. And what we're seeing today since October 7th is that this friendship, this prophetic, godly, holy friendship between Christians and Jews, even during times when Christians have to go against the tide, even when every other community has turned their back on Israel and the Jewish people, even sometimes when Christians are threatened themselves for standing with Israel and the Jewish people, they are steadfast in that support. They do not give it up. They are loud and bold and faithful. And they say, I'm not relying on my government. I'm not relying on anyone to speak my voice. I'm going to speak it myself. And I stand with Israel. And so, as we approach this 1 year anniversary of those October 7th attacks that changed Israel and I think the world forever, I think if there's one thing the Jewish people have learned, it's that never again will we be alone. We have an army of faithful Christians who will stand by our side always.
Oh, that's amazing. And so we just have a few moments left, but what is one practical thing that those watching today could do right now to make a difference?
Well, everything makes a difference, and especially the food boxes that are giving life to people in Israel right now. So, if you want to be the answer to prayer to an elderly or a child in Israel under rocket attack that is praying for a food box, you can go to International Fellowship of Christians and Jews Canada, and with just $40, you're able to change a life.
Amazing. Well, we're going to be right back to talk a little bit more about this when we return. Again, Yael, thank you so much for joining us. And I think this is such an important thing that we need to talk about, and not only talk about, in theory, what is happening, but also what practically we can do to make a difference. And so What has uniquely positioned IFCJ to address the challenges facing impoverished Jews today in Israel?
Well, I have to tell you, Bill, I feel like for 40 years of the fellowship's activities on the ground, blessing Israel and the Jewish people, and being a conduit for Christians who might not be able to walk the streets of the Holy Land, but they're able to make an impact there by providing a food box or bringing a Jewish person from Ukraine home to Israel on Aliyah, resettling them from Ukraine into Israel or across the Middle East to Israel where they're persecuted or living in poverty. We've been doing that for 40 years, but I feel like it all was leading up and setting us up for what we've been able to do since October 7th. In the past year, both the national government, the local governments, the local first responders, all different ministries, and most potent are the calls from individuals who need our help. We've been able to respond because we have the infrastructure set up. We've provided the ability for almost every single hospital in Israel to respond to mass casualty attacks. We've provided underground sheltered space at hospitals so that they can continue saving lives even under rocket threats. We've placed bomb shelters, thousands of them, that are being used, unfortunately, as I'm doing this interview. We've been on the ground in Israel for so many years that since October 7th, we've been able to not start our programs, but just grow the programs that we already know how to do in the most effective way. So praise God, since October 7th in the past year, we have been blessed that Christians around the world have entrusted us to distribute over $100 million of life-saving aid across Israel, reaching over hundreds of thousands of people in so many different ways. And so I think we were called for such a moment as this, if I can say.
Yeah. And I'm interested and curious. I mean, you're on the ground with your team. You're seeing obviously things that they don't show on the news or can't show on the news. And I'm curious, is there something you think that Canadians should know that we aren't hearing or we don't know about? Something that is really impacting you even personally?
Well, I think that until you experience it, you can't imagine what it's like to live your entire life knowing that on every single border, there are armed terrorists with over 100,000 rockets aimed at your country who want your destruction and are just waiting to get the instruction to pull the trigger until they do that. On October 7th, we saw what Hamas did, but Hamas is a very small terror group compared to Hezbollah, for example, who's part of the Lebanese government. And so from the time I've lived here, I have an 18-year-old all the way down to an 8-year-old, 4 children, thank God, who are born in Israel. They've known their entire lives, what do you do during a code red siren? What do you do how long do you stay in a bomb shelter for when a rocket is launched at your city? What do you do when there's a terrorist who starts shooting? And I pray that by having these wars, which are painful and hard, and Lord help us, may we have peace soon, but I pray that it will enable Israel to finally wipe out the terror groups that are on our border, that children no longer have to fear a terrorist invading or running to the bomb shelter. I pray that this war that's painful and that every single person in Israel is reeling from personally, I just pray that it will lead to days of peace that we see. We can have the Abraham Accords. We could have peace with our Arab neighbors. It actually has even sustained throughout this war, those friendships and peace agreements, because peaceful countries want a partnership with Israel. And I pray that this war will bring us to peaceful days.
Yeah, I think it's a really good reminder for all of us to not take what peace we do have here in this nation for granted, and also to just be aware that there are forces at work. And so, what do you see as some of the tangible solutions moving forward?
Well, I can tell you that just yesterday, my son, when my 8-year-old was going out bike riding, and I said to him, what do you do if there's a code red siren? And he said, I get down on the ground if I can't reach a shelter in time. And I said, but what do you make sure when you get down on the ground? What are you looking for? He said, I'm making sure I'm not in the street so a car doesn't come and accidentally hit me. And I stay with my hands over my head for 10 minutes so that no pieces of shrapnel will hit me. And I think that what we need right now is more bomb shelters. And that's what the fellowship is doing. We've placed bomb shelters next to every single bus stop in northern Israel from 0 to 9 kilometers from the border. Those shelters have been used every single day by school children that otherwise wouldn't have a shelter and would have to get down on the ground like I was instructing my son to do when he was riding his bike. I think we need shelters. I think we need food. We need the basics. And so the more we can do to tangibly protect the people of Israel, provide for the people of Israel, be that source of comfort and that voice that says, I, as a Canadian or as an American or wherever you are in the world watching this, as a Christian, I'm not going to rely on my government to stand with Israel. I'm going to do what I can individually. That message is heard so loud and clear here in Israel through the work of the fellowship.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to bring us an update and to tell us about what you're doing. And I'm making a commitment to you right now, and I know that hundreds watching are going to make the same commitment. We are going to be praying for the peace of Israel and for your safety. And so thank you. Keep up the great work. And again, if you want to get involved, you can go to our website at 700club.canada.ca and find out more about that. Thanks, Yael, for being here today.
God bless you. Thank you.